I'm Shannon Vandermark. This is the Happily Ever After Without Children podcast. Welcome back, subscribers, and greetings to those just tuning in. This podcast is for anyone who doesn't have children and for anyone who loves someone who doesn't have children. It is for those who have struggled to conceive, but also for those who have woken up one day and realized it's just a little bit too late. It's also for those triumphant in their decisions to never have children in the first place. Everyone holds a rightful place in this conversation. Everyone. And that means the fellas too. If you like what you hear, please take a moment to write a review on the Happily Ever After Without Children podcast on iTunes. More reviews help make the show more visible to anyone searching for this topic. I want this show available to any and everyone, but because I am an independent producer, I don't have the luxury of a publicity department. You are all my publicity department. Thanks for all of your hard work. I'm always looking for anyone willing to speak to me openly about their journeys to reach a happily ever after without children. And that includes men. I find it incredibly difficult to find men who will open up about this subject. So if you are a dude, please get in touch. I would love to hear from you. If you would like to be a guest on the show, please do get in touch. Send me an email. Reach happilyeverafter@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter if you search Happily Ever After Podcast. So here we are at episode 5. Today is an exciting day for me because my sister is being induced pretty much as I speak. And in only a few hours, hopefully, for her sake, I'll have a new niece or nephew. She's all the way over in Kansas City, and I'm here in England, and I really wish I could be there to share this experience with her, but it's just not possible due to work and the expense of travel and the general unpredictability of having a baby. She just so happened to know she was having it today as of a couple days ago, but it's just a bit difficult to plan these sort of things. But I'll go out to visit in a month or so I will be counting the days until then. I mean, it just makes me think that maybe the podcast should be called Happily Ever After Without My Own Children, because I'm certainly not happy without children in general, actually. And I miss my nephew terribly. And I'm sure I'm going to miss my niece or nephew as soon as I meet them, because I already love them. Isn't that funny how that happens? It's just like you already know you love that little bean. Anyway, I'm currently sat in my car in a car park at the beach, having just did a morning swim with 2 of my more adventurous girlfriends. The water was really calm and warm, and none of us wore wetsuits, which was brave, but not difficult. It was so lovely, and just swimming in the water just takes you back to childhood, paddling around in the sea. It's so fun. The beach was pebbly, though, and that really hurts because you can't really walk into the sea with your shoes on. Well, I guess some people do. They've got, surf shoes, but we didn't have those, so it's kind of like, ouch, 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 tiptoeing into the sea. We all agreed that the most terrifying aspect of sea swimming is not the sharks or the jellyfish or even the riptides, which really scare me, but it's the pebbly beach you have to contend with on the way into and out of the water. There are a few changes afoot with the podcast. Most importantly, I'm going to be spending more of my time and energy creating and broadcasting and less time promoting, which I think is the right move. I'll be increasing my output to weekly episodes. Eek, I'm scared. It's a lot. And adding features along the way to keep it interesting. This week's episode is my story. I just talk for a while about why I'm doing this podcast, and I give a bit more detail about my experiences with infertility and miscarriages. It might sound a little different because I was also recording video for my Patreon subscribers, so it kind of sounds like it's coming out of a computer, which it is, as opposed to a proper microphone. It is pretty free-flowing because I didn't want to edit myself. Because it's really hard to edit yourself and your story, so I just kind of let it go. There will be another full-length interview with a guest next week. I hope you enjoy this episode, and I'll check in with you at the break. Hello! Hi! If you are watching, this is the microphone, this big, weird, white thing. which I think does the trick, but is not the most photogenic thing to look at. It's called a snowball, and it's just a big white microphone that's right in front of me. And I'm sitting in my home office, which is also the guest room. And it's really nice. This is where I do all of my work, pay the bills, and do all of this podcast work. Behind me is the guest bed, and there's a desk and some pictures on the walls, mostly of boats and my nephew in a frame. So that's what you're seeing or what you're not seeing. Kind of annoying if you're not seeing it, I guess, to hear me say what you're not seeing. But if you'd like to see what I am shooting on these videos, please become a patron on my Patreon site so that I can continue to be a freelance producer and not rely on advertisers or kind of third-party sponsors. And that is how you will get exclusive content like this and other things. I'm going to be recording my interviews with other people on video as well as audio from now on as well. So that should be a good bonus. Also, if you're not already following me on Instagram, that's a great place to go to get I try to do daily quotes or kind of positive photos or little just posts about what is happening in my life that is fun and good and trying to look on the positive side of things. So yeah, it's the Happily Ever After podcast. If you search for that on Instagram, you'll find me. So for this first experiment in just talking to the wall, I think I'm going to talk about what brought me here in a little bit more detail, because I know that if you've listened to any of the previous episodes, you'll have gotten just a glimpse of my story and why I'm very passionate about this project. Broad strokes are that my husband and I were trying to have a baby for about 6 years, really. It started pretty much right when we got married, which was in October of 2009. We were kind of trying, and it took almost a year before I got pregnant for the first time. And then we pretty much stopped in 2015. So yeah, about 6 years of putting some effort in, really. And once we kind of decided to stop, I found it to be very difficult to find other people in a similar situation, people who had wanted children at one time and then just didn't end up with them and were kind of okay with that, or were trying to be okay with that. There seemed to be a real lack of those people. It seemed like most people who wanted them eventually ended up with one, whether through adoption or IVF or egg donors, things like that. All of those options, which were probably available to us, and we tried some of them, but eventually decided not to. And I found there to be a lot of just depressing films and books and just a real lack of a happily ever after narrative that included trying to get something, not getting it, and being okay with it, and not thinking that you were a failure or that you were giving up or a quitter or, an uplifting happily ever after. So that's why we're here. So I hope that you are finding this an interesting project as well, and it's lifting the isolation on other people who feel like they're the only ones in the world that could possibly feel this way. Lonely, disappointed, sad, just mixed emotions about other people's kids and other people's pregnancies. It's really difficult when you're going through the trying and the not succeeding to be happy for other people and to kind of join in other people's experiences of pregnancy and motherhood and fatherhood, I found. And it is a really selfish kind of feeling that is really hard to shift. With a lot of things, you can check yourself, and when you're being just a bit jealous because somebody has a better, I don't know, car, or got onto the property ladder sooner, or is thinner, or I don't know. There's a trillion things you could compare, trillion ways you can compare yourself to somebody else. And usually you can check yourself and be like, well, I need to focus on what I have and not worry about other people. And you can talk yourself out of it, because really a lot of that stuff is just material possessions and it doesn't really matter. But when it comes to talking yourself out of feeling jealous of somebody who's pregnant, or just talking yourself into being happy for a close friend or family member who's pregnant or has just had a baby, it's not only difficult, but it's annoying that it's difficult. It's so annoying. And I don't know, it would make me feel just even worse. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. The tangent was, if you feel anything like that, I totally understand. And I guess if I can be open and honest about those feelings that used to kind of affect me on a daily basis, then maybe it can help other people. And a lot of people are also saying that this is probably a good kind of self-therapy for me. But I mean, of course it is. Of course it is. It's hard work for therapy. It'd probably be easier to just pay somebody £60 a week for an hour or whatever than to produce a podcast. But I think, yeah, of course it is. It's helpful for me, but that is not why I started doing it. I started doing it because nobody had done it for me. And I don't blame any of you listening, but I did feel like there was a gap in content that was helpful for me. So yeah, I guess in a way I am creating this to help myself, but I'm more interested in the just broader community of people in this kind of unwanted childlessness space that so many of us kind of exist in, but you don't know that they're out there. I mean, you can go on Facebook groups and blogs, and you can find people, but I sometimes when you're going through it, you go through these stages of just not even wanting to think about it. And then when you want to think about it, it's almost so much effort to kind of find those groups. So hopefully this podcast, if I can keep it up regularly, then you can check in every once in a while and just subscribe, and just check in when you feel like it, and don't listen when you don't feel like it, and see how you go. So back to me. I'm wearing an Australian Pink Floyd t-shirt, concert t-shirt, if you were interested. It's if you haven't checked out the Australian Pink Floyd, they are awesome. They're a cover band, but they basically put on a full Pink Floyd concert, which is pretty cool because you can't really see them anymore. Well, you can't see them anymore. So it's the next best thing. Okay, I'll stop avoiding talking about this. So the first thing that happened to me was that it obviously took a long time for me to get pregnant. Also, I'd been on birth control since I was really young because of period cramps and things. So I stopped birth control as soon as I got engaged. So I wasn't on birth control for a year before we got married. And, we weren't really being that careful. I guess we were kind of being careful, but anyway, nothing happened. And then once we were kind of not being careful at all, still nothing happened. And it was really disappointing because I really thought that I was going to just magically get pregnant on our honeymoon. And we didn't even we got married in October and we didn't take our honeymoon until the following March. And that was the first ooh, that's annoying. That didn't, what? And it actually felt like a pretty significant loss to not get pregnant when I wanted to on our honeymoon. It didn't fit the narrative that I had kind of written. Um, so that was the first thing. But then I did get pregnant. And I'm a little bit hazy on exact dates. I'm sure you don't really care about the exact dates, and you probably don't need to hear a full, detailed uh, rundown of every single thing that happened anyway. But the first time I got pregnant was around May of 2010. And I was going off to shoot a TV show not too far from home, a couple hours from home. And while I was shooting this TV show, I'm a TV producer. I can't remember why I went to the hospital. Something must have been weird. But I went to the hospital and they said that I had miscarried. And that was around 9 weeks in. And that was really shocking. And also, it was a really brutal miscarriage because what happens is they tell you, but you're still pregnant. Like, you still have pregnancy hormones, and it's still like, it's not like it's left you. So they have you come back for a DNC, they call it, where they clear the products of conception out, and they schedule it in, and they send you home, and you're kind of like, well, they give you the option. I don't know what it's like in the States, but in the UK, if you go to an NHS hospital, if you miscarry around the time that I did, like 9 or 10 weeks, they give you the option to miscarry naturally or to come in to have them do it. So that, and they would prefer that you have them do it because it's they can make sure that everything's gone and that you're okay, and then send you home. But my initial thing was, and I think that this is pretty common, is, but if they take it out, then what if it's not really dead? Like, isn't it better to just miscarry naturally? Because then at least you know. And that was kind of hard for me to decide, but I decided to have them do it. So I scheduled it for like the next day or something. But like that night, I went home to my hotel room and miscarried naturally anyway, which, I mean, it's horrible. Obviously, it's horrible. It's, and I won't go into details about that, but the good thing about that is that, they were right. They're not going to take your baby when it's not dead. So I guess that's the benefit, and you see it, and I guess there's a bit of closure there. But it's pretty horrible because you actually get contractions. Anyway, so that happened, and then I didn't get pregnant again for another year. And I was working on a TV show again. In fact, I was working on, well, because it's my job, but I was working every time it happened. And every time it happened, I went back to work like the next day or the day of. And I don't know what that was all about. I mean, there were a couple times where I took the rest of the day off, but I don't think I took more than the rest of the day off. Whereas if I were to be talking to me and I was telling the story, I would just be like, you should take the rest of the week off or go away. And I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what I would say, but I don't think that was, I don't know. I did the best thing that I could at the time, because what are you going to do? Just sit home and worry about it. So there were each miscarriage was different. And there was one where I kept going to the hospital and they kept saying it was fine, but I was bleeding for several weeks. And they kept saying it was fine. And then I went to a Chinese doctor and they said, it's not fine. You need to go on bed rest. You need to stop working. So I did that, but it was too late. And then after going to this Chinese doctor, that I went on the herbs and I went on the acupuncture, and I got pregnant really quickly with them. And actually I got pregnant with twins. And we saw 2 heartbeats, and that was really exciting. In fact, I was pregnant with the twins when I went to go meet my nephew for the first time. And my nephew, who's now 5, my sister was pregnant with him and I was pregnant at the same time, and so we were pregnant at the same time, and we kind of told each other around the same time, and we were so excited to be pregnant together, and we thought that, we're very close, and we just thought our kids would be kind of like, well, they'd obviously be cousins, but they'd be like cousin twins, and we it was really exciting for a few days or weeks or however long it lasted. But I think, when you get pregnant, I'm sure everybody does this. You just kind of start making plans and kind of fantasizing, and time goes by really slow for those first 13 weeks before you can tell anyone. Um, and I was looking on an app that was saying it's the size of a pea, it's the size of a lima bean, it's the size of, and now they've got like, oh, it's the size of a little Lego figurine. And you get I got really addicted to that stuff. But you're just so excited. Anyway, so when I lost that one, I don't know. I can't really remember my sister's pregnancy. I think it was hard for me. I mean, she was living in LA at the time, and I was in London, so it's not like I saw her that often. I mean, I saw her once. She came over right before she came over as late as she could before she had my nephew. And I think she was great about kind of telling me stuff, but also kind of letting me not be as connected as I would have definitely been in other circumstances. But then also, I also miscarried and then decided that I was going to have this hip replacement that I'd been putting off, because I was convinced that I was having miscarriages because I had some sort of inflammation. Inflammation is a big thing these days. Like, you're supposed to eat a diet so that you don't have inflammation. You're supposed to, it's actually probably, just a logical thing. Like, don't have too much acidic stuff. Don't, have too much sugar. All that stuff causes inflammation and heat. Anyway, because of the kind of friction and pain I was in with my arthritis in my hip, and I had really no more cartilage left, so they said I needed a hip replacement. And I thought, oh, maybe that's kind of making it hard for me to get pregnant and, keep a pregnancy. So I scheduled the miscarriage. I scheduled the miscarriage. I scheduled the hip replacement, and I had that. And I just remember going home for Christmas, and because that my hip replacement was scheduled for the following January. My sister was pregnant. She was about halfway through, and I think maybe somebody else I was close to was pregnant at the same time. And I was just so pissed off. I was just like, I am supposed to be pregnant and having a baby, and I'm having a freaking hip replacement. It's not fair. It's not. I was so angry at that point. But I also thought that I would have this hip replacement and it would be the solution. So I had the replacement in January, and then I did get pregnant pretty soon after that. But yeah, that was with twins, and that obviously it didn't work. And then we paid to go after we paid for the Chinese doctor, which was, we did that for a good few months. So it was not the most expensive thing in the world, but you're paying for daily herbs, and I think I would have acupuncture at least twice a week. I did that for, probably half a year, I guess. And then once we lost the twins, I think my husband was kind of done at that point, because, he got really excited about finding the best car that could fit 2 car seats. And we had my friend's wedding that was coming up in the following June in Greece. And we were kind of doing the math going, oh my God, we're going to have 3-month-old twins. Can we go to this wedding with 3-month-old twins? I don't know. Yeah, but we were just so excited, and of course we could. And we also thought twins was a perfect solution for our problem because we didn't want to have an only child because we were worried about an only child being spoiled, um, and we definitely didn't want to go through all of this again after we finally had one. So we thought, oh, if we could just have twins, then we'd kind of get it all done with, and there's no way they could be spoiled because you barely have time to kind of, even take care of one of them properly, I guess, which seemed, you know, chaotic but ideal. Anyway, so when we lost those, I just think I think Robin was just like, that was the first one that he really felt invested in, I think. And I just think didn't want to go through that again. Well, he didn't. I know he didn't. He said that. So I was kind of like, okay, one more shot with a really expensive Harley Street miscarriage specialist. I'm going to take a short break here for the 3 questions feature. A dear friend of mine suggested I ask everyone on the show 3 identical questions about their child-free lives, and then they can answer 1, 2, or all of them. I thought that was a great idea. This week, I'll be answering the questions myself. The first question: what is one thing that breaks your heart about not having children today? Well, today, I think because my sister's having a baby, it's just obviously that my sister's kids don't have any cousins. I mean, they might. My brother might have kids. It's entirely possible. But I would love... My sister's my best friend in the world, and I can't believe that our kids aren't cousins. That breaks my heart today. Most days, but today in particular. Okay, next question. What is your most precious child-free nugget today? Well, that is just waking up when I felt like it, which was still pretty early. I mean, it was like 8 o'clock, and going to the sea for a swim, and then deciding I'm not ready to go home yet. I want to take a walk along the beach, and I took a 2-hour walk. I don't have any... I can kind of have my own schedule to some extent. Obviously, I have other commitments, but today my child-free nugget is free time to swim in the sea and walk along the beach on a beautiful August afternoon. And final question: how do you respond to the question, do you have children? Okay, so this has always been tricky for me, but has gotten a lot easier since doing the podcast. In fact, talking about things has gotten so much easier since doing the podcast. So the way I respond to the question, do you have children? I have been saying, no, I don't. We tried for a while, and I actually I had several miscarriages, and now I'm doing a podcast about the next chapter, so I get out there my story, but then I also don't leave the other person feeling bad about the conversation, which is always something that I struggled with before. I just didn't want to make anybody else feel uncomfortable or sad or be like, oh, which then in turn made me feel bad. So I think it's been really good to answer honestly and let people take that honesty, but then follow it up with what I'm doing. And I think that says a lot, because it says, yeah, that wasn't just a phase of my life. Oh, it didn't work out and I've moved on. It was obviously something very important, and it's still important, and we can talk about it now because, I'm sure you have something to say about me doing this podcast, and it becomes a conversation, and it's been great. So that is my answer. Now, back to this week's episode, where I'm just touching on the frequent miscarriage specialist I went to see as a last hope. I'll check in with you on the other side. So I was kind of like, okay, one more shot with a really expensive Harley Street miscarriage specialist at the New Life Clinic. And he's a frequent miscarriage specialist. And Um, he he's got he's doing a lot of research on natural killer cells and how that affects fertility. The NHS doesn't accept that as a cause of infertility, and it's kind of at the moment, like a pseudoscience. So you have to go private if you want to look into that sort of thing. So he did a ton of expensive tests on me and found that I had a bunch of natural killer cells. So they were killing. They they were attacking sperm, and any sperm that got in, they were attacking just the pregnancy hormone. And then if those managed to survive, they would attack the fetus. So there might have even been another level of warfare. But the way he explained it was that I, it's, it was rare, but all of my tests came back positive for these natural killer cells that were killing every chance of me getting pregnant and hanging on to a pregnancy. So, I mean, at that point, I'm not going to lie, I did have the conversation with my husband where I was like, I mean, what are they trying to tell us? Like, what kind of, what are we going to create? I mean, my body's fighting it. So, I mean, I know we've got science and we can fix it, but should we? I mean, that was a big thing. And I think I decided to just give it, well, we just decided, pay the money. If we didn't, we might regret it. And yeah, if it was meant to be, it's meant to be kind of thing. So we spent so much money with that doctor, and I had to give myself so many injections because also after my hip replacement, I realized with the help of my cousin who pointed out on some of my test results that I have this factor V Leiden, which is a blood clotting disorder, which is good. She caught that because, I mean, you need to be careful with surgeries if you've got something like that. So, I need to take aspirin and wear those sexy compression stockings before I take flights. And because, I have a blood clotting disorder. It's not a big deal. I think it's fairly common, but it could have been another reason why I was miscarrying. So once they found that, each time I was pregnant after that, which I think was only 2 times, I had to give myself daily injections, blood thinning injections. And you literally that is a crazy process because you look like a battered person. You've got bruises just everywhere. You run out of places to inject yourself that doesn't have a massive bruise. It's terrible. But you do it, and you obviously are fine with it because it's worth it, because there'll be a baby at the end. So yeah, so in addition to all of those, I also had a lot of the doctor on Harley Street had me on these shots that are also prescribed to people who have autoimmune conditions like Crohn's disease and things. So it kind of suppresses the immune system. And this one injection in particular, was £750, which is like, I don't know, $900 at least. And they deliver it in like a pack of dry ice, and you have to inject it when it's, at a certain temperature because otherwise it doesn't work. And it's really stressful because you have to do it yourself. And then you're kind of like, what if a little bit of it drops on the floor? There goes 70 pounds. Hope that wasn't the bit that would have worked. I mean, it didn't happen. It all went in, but and they're huge needles. My cousin, my husband couldn't even help me because sometimes I'd just get so bored with the injections. It wasn't even painful, or it was just boring and annoying. So I'd be like, "Oh, could you do?" And he did do a couple of them, but he didn't really enjoy it at all. But yeah, so there were kind of expensive injections from that guy, and other things I had to do. Nobody ever said, um, change your diet or don't drink or your husband shouldn't drink or anything like that. And by the way, my husband got tested for everything and nothing was wrong with him at all, which annoyed me. I mean, there was, yeah, nothing. So it was all 100% my body attacking this. Um, so yeah, with the expensive doctor, it didn't work. And so the weird thing that happened with him is that he kind of said it would take like 8 months before all of these medications kind of formed the ideal environment for getting pregnant. And we were supposed to keep trying throughout, but like it was the month of, I don't know, whatever it was, April, that was supposed to be the month. Well, by like February, it would have been February or March, I just had it. Like, you have to take pregnancy tests, like a few of them a month, because you have to take it as soon as it's possible that you're pregnant, because then you have to immediately go and see him so he can inject you with all of these like egg white things that kind of get the pregnancy going. And I don't know. Anyway, so you have to take a pregnancy test like immediately when you could, as soon as you might be pregnant, and then like daily until you get your period. And so you just get negative, negative, negative for like all these days, all these months. And I just am not really good with failure and disappointment. And finally, I just said I'm not doing it anymore and quit right before it really should have worked. And then I panicked. I was like, what am I doing? And then I got pregnant. But I wasn't taking anything anymore with him. And I hadn't been for a month or two. And he was pretty much like, well, I don't know if this probably won't work. I'll do everything I can. And he gave me a bunch of things and it didn't work. And when I lost that one, he didn't have an anesthetist. So I like had a DNC, and he wanted to do the DNC. I mean, I had the option to have him do it or to go to the NHS and have them do it under anesthesia. And I had him do it because he would have been able to possibly study the sample and see what went wrong, which is what you want. But he took the sample and he couldn't figure out what was wrong. But yeah, so there's no anesthetist. So you feel everything and you're awake. And I saw everything that he was pulling out and plopping on like a silver tray. It was really horrific. And I think it's permanently scarred me and I probably need to deal with that. But needless to say, that was the last time we tried. What was really lovely, though, about a couple of those, or at least two, was that my husband's mom came with me because she's a nurse, and there were a couple times my husband had to work and couldn't come to the DNC, and she would come with me, and she was so great, and like take me out to lunch after, and she would be like, "Do you want a glass of wine? I'm going to get a glass of wine." And I'd be like, "Oh, should I?" And she's like, "Yeah," and make it a large one. I was like, "But what about the anesthesia?" And she's like, "It's fine." And she was really good. It was, yeah, and that was really nice having somebody there, even though it's really awkward because in a way you don't know what you want. You just like, you have no idea what you want. You want to be left alone, but you don't want to be alone. You want ice cream, but you want wine, or you want to cry, but you don't want to cry. It's just, yeah. I think the most dramatic thing that I did after a miscarriage was go swimming in Brighton, and it was like June, and it was freezing. And I was just, and the only way I could describe it was this, at least I can feel this, because everything else just felt like dull, and yeah, you just want to feel something, even if it's sharp. And then when I told the therapist I was seeing at the time, she was like, "I might need to report this as self-harm," and I was just like, "It's it's not well, okay. But anyway, it wasn't self-harm. It was just, you just go into autopilot. It's just, yeah, I can't really describe that, that well, of what it feels like to not feel anything, or to just not want to feel anything close to what you're going through. So you'd rather feel something else. But it's a terrible feeling. And once you do something, I think that's the other fear, is once you do something on that day, or in the days immediately following it, that everything's connected to that horrible experience. I remember really clearly after losing the twins, Robin and I were driving home, and there's this little woodland area along the road that we went down to get home from Kingston Hospital, I think it was. And I was just like, oh, just stop the car. I just need to walk. And now I can't drive by that woodland without thinking about that day. Yeah. So it kind of gets stuck with you, these moments. So, yeah, that's kind of the story of how that all played out for us. And then I think once we decided to stop trying for that, I think we never wanted to do IVF or anything. We didn't want to do anything too medical ever. And a big reason for that was, I just had all of these things in my body trying to get rid of the pregnancy. I just we didn't think it was natural. And if it didn't happen as natural as possible, then we thought we shouldn't do it. We did look into adoption. We got accepted by a private agency and kind of the local council one, and they were ready to start kind of putting us into the next phase. But we pulled out of that because we realized that, this is another whole conversation, but it's very difficult. And the children who are available have been in the kind of adoption foster system for at least 2 years. They have kind of several issues, in the very minimum, kind of attachment issues, and lots of kind of abuse at home potentially, and drug dependency, alcohol dependency. And I think it takes a really special couple to walk into that with their eyes open and take these children. And I think I thought I could have done it. But we didn't think we could do it. And that's the important thing. We're married, and I'm not doing it on my own because it would have been hard enough. But when we started going down the adoption route, we started working with the local Cub Scout group and Sea Scouts, and we're still doing that now. So even though we're not trying to adopt, we're still really involved with children in the community, which is really nice. Because it's more than just kind of volunteering, or, it's hopefully being a positive role model to kids, and in a way that maybe you wouldn't even be able to with your own kids. So we're really enjoying that. And I highly recommend, getting involved with, there's so many kids that need, mentoring in some way. So, for us, it's pretty good. And that kind of brings us up to now. Yeah, I guess when I talk about my specific experiences, it's still upsetting. Of course it is. But I can also say that I'm really climbing out of that space where I was not able to be happy for other people, or spend time with other people who are pregnant, or go in and out of wanting to be around children. And so now the situation with being around children is I love being around kids, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes I want to just do adult stuff. And that doesn't mean it's painful for me to be around kids. It just means, I mean, let's be honest. If we asked our friends who had kids, if your kids were at camp for a week, would you go do family stuff and kid stuff by yourself? No, I think they'd probably avoid kid stuff because kids are annoying sometimes. So sometimes I just don't feel like doing kid stuff, but interacting with kids, I love. And, especially when they're not being pains in the ass, which is sometimes. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more that I could say about our story. But I know that when I talk to other people, I'm, letting them kind of lead the conversation, and I'm happy to answer questions if they have them or interject my own experience into the interviews I do. So anyway, that's pretty much my story. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so now. If you have any comments or feedback, or if you have your own story to tell and would like to be a guest on the program, please email me at reachhappilyeverafter@gmail.com. If you like the show, please write a quick review in iTunes so that you can help me spread the word. More reviews help make the show more visible to anyone searching for this topic within iTunes. Another great way to help is to become a patron. Please visit the Happily Ever After Without Children page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Happily Ever After podcast to make a monthly contribution so that I can remain an independent producer and so that you can get exclusive perks. This month's perk is an unedited video version of this episode. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter if you search Happily Ever After Podcast. And finally, please share the details of this podcast with your network of friends and family. You never know who else might be suffering and could really use a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. This is your host, Shannon Vandermark, and I thank you for listening.